Hi, it's Lucy Carlson here. We just got a great big, very elaborate box set from Sony Columbia chronicling the career of one of the all-time great film directors. I'm very happy to add this to my collection, and today it's getting reviewed and unboxed. This is the Frank Capra at Columbia collection, featuring 20 films directed by Capra, plus a brand new documentary on his life. I'm going to unbox this release and share my opinions. And believe me, there's plenty to unbox this time around. Here's the front cover of the package featuring Capra there, title of the collection with his name. Got a picture of him, top of the box, bottom of the backing card there. 20 movie limited Blu-ray collection. Also features 9 movies on 4K Ultra High Def. Side of the box. This time you got Frank standing by his camera. On this side you have him in a director's chair, appropriately enough. Back of the backing card has a list of all of the films that are in the set, as well as a picture of the open set, description of what's to be had here. Here's what you get on the back underneath the backing card. You got posters of all of the films that are featured in here. So now let's open this thing up. And it's kind of hard to tell based on the fact that this is on my lap, but this set actually sits back at an angle, so it's not just like a straight set. I'm not curving this, that's actually how it looks because the bottom's flat and this is tipped back. And the way this set opens up is you actually have 2 doors here. These are magnetic, but you pull that up, then you push the door in, and then you do the same thing on the other side. Take that up, push it in. And here you can see the spines of all of the discs. There's, I believe, 18 disc cases in here. The movies that are Blu-ray and 4K obviously have 2 discs because of the 2 formats. But this brings me to my biggest design problem with this set. They did not include a way to take the discs out. Because they're sandwiched in here so tightly, there's no way to take them out without actually tilting them over and pouring them out of the set. That said, though, let's go ahead and get them out and we'll take a look at each. I'm not going to do a super thorough review of each film. I'll just give a brief overview of each of them to give you an idea of what they're about. There's a look inside the box with the discs out. The first film in the set is So This Is Love. The earliest films that are in this set are actually silent films, including this one. Disappointingly, the ones that are in Blu-ray cases just have like a plain white backing. I wish they would have put some art on the back of the card. This one's about a young man who's in love with a woman, but she finds herself under the eye of a boxer who's a bit of a bully, so he has to learn how to fight so he can try to win his woman back. And it doesn't help that he soon finds himself in the boxing ring against this man. Second film in the set is The Way of the Strong. This one deals with a mobster who's in love with a blind musician out on the streets, and he takes her in, and it's not long before he finds himself in a gang war with another gang leader. We then have That Certain Thing. This one deals with the son of a millionaire who marries against his father's wishes, and he's quickly cut off. But the two of them try to go into business for themselves so that they can make a living independently. Of course, it's not long before his dad takes sight of his success and wants to try to get a piece of the action himself. First film that we have in 4K and Blu-ray is Submarine. And this one deals with 2 friends and rivals who are stationed on submarines, and the relationship between the 2 men gets very rocky when it turns out that they're both in love with the same woman. And when one of them finds himself stranded on the bottom of the ocean, it's up to them to put their grudges aside and trust in each other so that there can be a rescue. We then have The Younger Generation. This one's actually half talky, half silent. And it deals with a young boy who becomes a shrewd businessman and very successful, but his success and his being ashamed of his roots alienates him from his family, which of course has disastrous consequences. We then get a double feature of Flight and Ladies of Leisure. Flight is another one of the vehicle-based films, this time dealing with pilots going down to South America to deal with an insurgency. And then Ladies of Leisure deals with a woman who's paid to go to parties and things like that. She ends up finding herself falling in love with a man who's an artist that wants to paint her, despite some friction between the two. Next up, Rain or Shine. This one deals with a circus troupe, and of course the circus, following the death of its previous owner, has not been doing very well, so it's up to a fast-talking con man of sorts to take over the circus and get people to fund the operations, seeing if they can get it to stay afloat. This movie actually has two different cuts. There's an international cut, which is a little shorter, but actually has some additional extended scenes not in the American version, whereas the American version is the full-length version, but does obviously lack some of that stuff that was reshot for the international cut. We then have Dirigible, and this is the third in that vehicle trilogy of sorts. Again, this one is presented on 4K as well as Blu-ray. This time around, two friendly rivals want to try to compete to get to the South Pole, but of course things start going horribly wrong, and of course one of them finds himself in something of an identity crisis when his ways of exploration and delusions of grandeur end up alienating him from his wife. Next up is The Miracle One, and this one's about a female preacher whose father passed away, something that she blames on the town, so she sets out to win the town over through her sermons, but in doing so, she ends up getting herself mixed up with people that she probably shouldn't, and she finds herself falling in love with a blind ex-military pilot. Next up, and also on 4K, we have Platinum Blonde. This time around, a reporters being very common characters in Capra films, finds himself falling in love with a beautiful society lady that he's trying to dig up dirt on. Before long, he secretly marries this woman, but of course the clashes in their two different lifestyles quickly end up creating friction in their relationship. Next up we have American Madness and The Bitter Tea of General Yen. American Madness deals with a man who runs a bank, but his superiors aren't too pleased with him, and when there's a robbery at the bank, of course that really makes him see how loyal a lot of the people around him really are. And then The Bitter Tea of General Yen involves a military general in China during a civil war who takes a beautiful woman captive, who of course wants to get away and get back to her hometown. We then have Forbidden and Lady for a Day. Forbidden revolves around a beautiful woman who goes on a cruise and meets a handsome gentleman, and the two of them end up having a child as a result. But it turns out he's married, and that certainly complicates things. Lady for a Day, the other film in this set, revolves around an apple vendor who's struggling to get by, but when she finds out that her daughter is coming to visit with her husband-to-be, she gets the help of some gangsters so she can pose as a lady of society. Next up in 4K, we have It Happened One Night, one of the most famous films in this collection, and actually a Best Picture winner. This one revolves around Clark Gable playing a reporter who's going after a society lady who's run away from her father, hoping to dig up some dirt and get the story of his lifetime, but he ends up finding himself falling for this woman, which again certainly complicates things. We then have Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, starring Gary Cooper. This movie revolves around a man who, of course, inherits a good deal of money, and he's taken off to the big city, and though he seems like a mindless yokel at first, he actually seems to be quite smart with money as time goes by. He later finds himself on trial regarding his sanity when he decides he's going to give the money away to try to help farmers. Next up, Lost Horizon. This one revolves around a plane that's hijacked, and its occupants, trying to escape from war-torn China, find themselves in the kingdom of Shangri-La, wanting to get away and get home, but they quickly find themselves having identity crises, not really knowing if they belong there, yet at the same time falling in love with this peaceful, isolated paradise. We then have You Can't Take It With You, another Best Picture winner for Frank Capra. And the story around this one revolves around the son of a bank president who finds himself falling in love with a woman, but of course their families are drastically different, and that means the inevitable disasters that unfold that you might expect. The last of the feature films from 1939 is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. This movie stars James Stewart as a young man who, to replace a deceased senator, is sent off to Washington, but he quickly finds that it's a very corrupt place, and there may not be a place for him there with all of the deals going on behind people's backs. Sadly, this movie is still frustratingly relevant in a lot of respects. And we do get one more disc in this collection. Frank Capra, Mr. America, this being a new documentary on Frank Capra himself, and certainly a must-watch for any fan. Wow, that's a lot of movies right there. As you can tell, this set is very comprehensive, and the selections of films run the gamut when it comes to plenty of different subject matters. I mean, Frank Capra, that documentary is called Mr. America, and I don't think there's any director that really tackles the subject of, Americana, everyday life, everyday people better than Frank Capra. Often those people in these movies are thrust into extraordinary circumstances, and it's always interesting to see how these plots unfold. Capra, of course, would later be best known for the film It's a Wonderful Life, which he made after World War II for a different company. So, of course, that particular movie is not in this set, but there is a sold separately 4K version of that available. I'm not saying every film in this collection is a masterpiece, but I certainly had a fun time marathoning this set. There's some great movies to be had here. I think I'd only probably seen about 3 of these movies before I bought this set, but I discovered some new favorites along the way. One minor disclaimer as well. A lot of these films do have some very dated cultural depictions. The Bitter Tea of General Yen, the title character, isn't even played by a Chinese man. He's just played by someone that they're trying to make look Asian. And then you do have a lot of black characters in subservient positions. So, again, a lot of these were just pretty commonplace depictions at the time. But again, just giving the obligatory viewer discretion is advised disclaimer there. So how do these movies actually look? I'm happy to say that the transfers on almost all of these look very good. It's pretty clear there's been some degree of serious restoration and remastering. Some of the movies, particularly the older ones, there are going to be some issues just based on the way that they were filmed, but for the most part, these are absolutely phenomenal restoration jobs, and I could not be happier with what I see here. Now, there are a few little exceptions here and there. Like Lost Horizon actually had to have some lost footage reinserted, and some of that lost footage is obviously in worse shape than the rest of the film. They had a complete audio track, but not complete video, so there are some sequences where they just have to use photographs where there is no footage available. But overall, again, most of these movies do look excellent. 2 of these movies had previously been released on 4K in the earlier Columbia Classic sets, those being It Happened One Night and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And It Happened One Night and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, they both get new commentary tracks here. Plus, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington gets the addition of Dolby Vision, which is pretty nice, and both films do look great. The only real complaint in that regard is that this disc of It Happened One Night, it does not have the musical remake of the film that was included in the Columbia Classics version, although it does add a new Capra-centric commentary track, so it's certainly not a loss. One of the few minor areas this collection is slightly lacking in is bonus features. Some of the discs don't have any bonus features at all. Some of them just have like commentaries and trailers. There are a few that have some minor featurettes. I mean, I saw guys like Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard, and of course his son Frank Capra Jr. showing up in a few of them. Mainly it's the better known big Oscar winner films that tend to get the bigger supplement packages, but I am glad to see that there's at least some stuff included in here. Some of the earlier movies I think could have used a little more, in particular the ones that maybe aren't the most popular. That said, though, this is an absolutely fantastic set. You get a ton of great movies. Again, not everyone's a masterpiece, but there's certainly more hits than misses. The picture quality on almost all of them is excellent when it comes to films this vintage. Some of the early talkies, the sound quality is slightly rough, but that's just par for the course when you're dealing with stuff from that era. And of course, that new Frank Capra, Mr. America documentary is a must-watch if you're a fan of the director. Price tag on this set is a little steep, but you do get a ton of content here. And if you are at all a fan of cinema, I think this collection does belong in your collection. Absolute highest recommendations. How about you? Are you a fan of Frank Capra? What do you think the greatest movie the guy ever made was? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel for more content. I'm always posting new videos. And make sure you give this one a like if you found it helpful. I'm Tilly T. Carlson. I'll see you next time.